Today, we're going to dive into a personal story that really shines a light on something a lot of us think we get, but maybe we don't. We're talking about stuttering. This is Aaron's journey, and it's a story all about moving from silence to finally truly finding his voice.
So let me just start by asking you a question, straight up. Do you really know what a stutter is? I mean, most of us have a surface level idea, right? But the actual lived experience, well, it's so much more complicated than just a speech impediment. It's a battle that's fought on the inside just as much as it is on the out. I absolutely love how Aaron himself describes it. He says a stutter is when breath and sound stop being dance partners. See, it's not a failure of intelligence, it's not a lack of words, it's this breakdown in a rhythm that, for most of us, is just completely automatic. We take it for granted.
And that brings us right into the first part of his story, the unseen battle. This is all about what happens on the inside, long before a single word even struggles to come out.
Aaron has this name for it, the work of speaking. Just think about that phrase for a second. For most of us, speaking is just breathing. It's automatic. But for him, it was manual labor. He says, I have to sew every syllable by hand. It's this constant, conscious effort where at any moment, the whole rhythm can just tear apart.
So, to cope with this, he developed what he calls survival tactics of invisibility. This meant things like shrinking his sentences to avoid tricky words, or just pointing at a menu instead of saying his order. He'd rehearse something as simple as introducing himself over and over again. His words felt safe on paper, but out in the air, absolutely terrifying.
And all of this led him to make a pretty heartbreaking choice. As he puts it, I decided silence was safer than spectacle. He basically chose to disappear rather than risk the judgment and the looks that so often came with speaking.
But here's the thing about that kind of safety. It came at a huge cost. His silence, it wasn't a solution. It was the beginning of this dangerous downward spiral, a prison he was building for himself.
And high school, as it so often does, just amplified everything. You had the bullying, the cruel imitations, and that constant unhelpful advice from people to just slow down. And, in our digital age, that cruelty didn't stop when the bell rang. It followed him home on screens at night.
You can kind of see how this descent was gradual. First, he started shrinking his sentences. Then he moved to just pointing at things, avoiding speech altogether. And finally, he was carrying a notes app on his phone like it was a spare lung, typing out entire conversations. His world was just getting smaller and quieter.
And, the body doesn't keep secrets kindly. All that anxiety started showing up physically. We're talking panic attacks that felt like heart attacks, shaking hands, this feeling of his bones buzzing, and it all led to some very dark thoughts and a true crisis point. A day he actually planned to say goodbye.
But right there, at that absolute lowest point, something happened. A lifeline appeared. And it wasn't some grand solution. It was just a few simple, incredibly powerful words. His mother sat with him right there on the floor, and she just repeated these 3 sentences over and over until they finally started to sink in. You are worthy, you are loved, you are needed. She didn't try to fix him, she just held that space for him, giving him a reason to choose to keep going. That moment, that was the turning point. It was the beginning of the next chapter, the slow, intentional, and often messy work of repair. So he started getting help. He went to therapy and finally got the language for what he was feeling, actual diagnoses of anxiety and depression. Medication helped quiet some of that internal static, and cognitive behavioral therapy gave him tools to catch those negative thought spirals. But what was really crucial? He began to reframe his stutter, not as some personal failure, but as a deeply learned pattern in his brain. And this reframing was everything. For Aaron, getting a diagnosis wasn't a verdict on who he was for the rest of his life, it was a map. For the very first time, he had a guide to help him navigate the terrain of his own mind. So what did that navigation actually look like? Well, it wasn't the Hollywood version. The expectation is so often some grand breakthrough, right? A single aha moment where everything is fixed. But the reality for Aaron was daily maintenance. Just small, consistent, and sometimes pretty boring work. So what does maintenance actually look like in real life? For Aaron, it was running, just to find a physical rhythm. It was practicing speech techniques. But it also meant making really hard choices, like building boundaries and even ending a harmful relationship. He even found this great metaphor in his hobby of repairing clothes, realizing that repair isn't a slogan, It's a skill you have to practice.
He also built what he calls scaffolding for those tough in-between moments. So in the morning, a simple prompt, what would make today just 2% easier? Not 100%, just 2%. In the middle of the day, a private breathing exercise he could do anywhere. And in the evening, a chance to reflect on the quiet, non-dramatic progress he'd made.
And all of this work, all of this daily maintenance, it led to this really profound shift. It took him from just surviving his voice to actually living in it. He even developed a new way to introduce his stutter, using humor to completely disarm the situation. He'll say something like, "If I pause, I'm just giving the sentence a head start." By owning it like that, he took away all its power to create shame. It's brilliant.
The best proof of his transformation, though, isn't in some big gesture. It's in the ordinary things. It's ordering a coffee without rehearsing the words 50 times, answering the phone without that spike of fear. It's giving talks where he intentionally stutters because, as he says, shame loses in well-lit rooms. And now he's mentoring teenagers who are going through the exact same thing.
This really was the ultimate transformation. I mean, his whole journey took him from surviving my voice to living in my voice. It's a complete shift from seeing his voice as the enemy to finally seeing it as his home. The wisdom he shares with others now is this: your voice is not a problem to solve. It's a place to live. And that is such a powerful message of acceptance over perfection. And it's one he earned through every single step of his journey.
And that really leaves us with a question to reflect on, doesn't it? Aaron's story is about a stutter, for sure, but the theme here is universal. So I'll just leave you with this. How can you, in your own life, turn a struggle you've been trying so hard to solve into a place where you can actually live?